From the Plot Against Christianity by Elizabeth Dilling. Forward to the 1964 edition, published by the Elizabeth Dilling Foundation. Who is Elizabeth Dilling? Our family trip to Red Russia in 1931 started my dedication to anti-communism. We were taken behind the scenes by friends working for the Soviet government and saw deplorable conditions firsthand. We were appalled not only at the forced labor, the squalid, crowded living quarters, the breadline ration card workers' stores, the mothers pushing wheelbarrows, and the begging children of the state nurseries besieging us. The open, virulent Antichrist campaign everywhere was a shock. In public places were the tirades by loudspeaker in Russian our friends translated, atheist cartoons representing Christ as a villain, a drunk, the object of a cannibalistic orgy, parentheses, Holy Communion, end parentheses, as an oppressor of labor, again as trash being dumped from a wheelbarrow by the Soviet, quote, 5-year plan, end quote. These lurid cartoons filled the big bulletin boards in the churches our Soviet guides took us to visit. In the Museum of the Revolution, we were shown a huge world map. As our guide turned a switch, lights came on indicating the places all over the world where the Communist Party headquarters were then functioning. Proudly, our guide announced, quote, "Our world revolution will start with China and end with the United States," end quote. Oh no, not that, was my thought. I took pictures of the Antichrist posters on the porch of St. Isaac's Cathedral in Leningrad. Russia changes my life. We were taken to the beautiful Church of the Redeemer in Moscow, which was then, we were told, about to be dynamited to make way for a, quote, palace of Soviets, end quote. There was a display of full-sized mannequins dressed in the robes of the church carrying on the Good Friday foot-washing ceremony. Our guide rasped, quote, "This was to show that if the archbishop could wash the feet of the humble priest, the poor should endure their sufferings without complaint. Religion was always for this oppression of the people, to keep them working from dawn to late at night under the lash," end quote. I thought of our Savior washing the feet of his disciples as an example and telling them that he who would be great among you should be the servant of all. John 13:13-15, Matthew 23:11. I glanced up at the exquisite stained-glassed window of Christ about to be demolished, and a little tear trickled down my cheek as I thought, I could never hate you like that. I did not know then that the Pharisee Talmud gives him 5 sadistic deaths today. Staying at my hotel was the representative of a foreign country. He told me of the police terror, how the last manager of that hotel had been whisked off in the middle of the night by the Black Maria, like millions of others, never to be seen again. Some of our party had been taken to the police station. They had laughed in a movie theater. They were released when they explained that they had laughed at a private joke, not at the picture, which was Soviet-made. After this and more, I returned to the, quote, nice, end quote, North Shore of Chicago, where the intelligentsia were rendering brainwashed reverence to the great Soviet experiment. Lecturing. Behind the backs of the careless guides, I had taken movies of the rickety trains, etc. in Russia. By chance, I started showing these movies to patriotic audiences, my husband running the projector as I told the stories. Articles written for a little local newspaper were reprinted by the DAR, and larger groups called for my talks. District meetings of the Legion, the military intelligence, churches from coast to coast. I was recommended for all chambers of commerce and spoke for the Minneapolis, Cleveland, Los Angeles, etc. groups. I broadcast over the Moody Bible Institute radio, and its head became my closest friend to her death. Dr. Ironside introduced me as the only woman he had ever asked to occupy his pulpit in the Moody Church. I spoke in the great church of Dr. W. B. Riley, organizer of the World Fundamentalist Association, my defender to his death. I frequently spoke in Detroit churches and on numerous occasions was entertained at the executives' table at the Ford plant. Henry Ford, who never changed his mind about the role of Jewry, had me write, in 1939, a report on the University of Michigan, 80 pages. He contributed that year $5,000 to the cost of my office labor, which cost $12,000 that year. The head of the National Sojourners had me airmail my 2 books to Senator Royal Copeland to give to Vice President Garner, who, I was told, stayed up all night reading them and had his friend Congress Dyes of Texas start up the Dyes Committee on Un-American Activities, later called the House Committee, as a result. The hub of world Jewish Antichrist power, the financial and industrial power best described in Revelation 18, verse 11, is the American Jewish Committee with its B'nai B'rith Brotherhood and its secret police, smear and ruin arm, the Anti-Defamation League. After having pushed a reluctant USA into World War II to spread communism across the earth, and with its first world base, Soviet Russia, as our, quote, ally, end quote, it was decided to crush all anti-communists by trying them as fascists, Nazis. A series of indictments against some 30 anti-communists, of which I was one, was engineered by the American Jewish Committee in 1942, 1943, 1944. The 1942 indictment never came to trial. The 1943 indictment was dismissed in Washington by Judge Adkins. Only the 1944 indictment went to trial under a stooge Judge Eicher. An unbelievable farce was staged without any legality or fact. After the death of Judge Eicher, the case was dismissed by Judge Belitha Laws with the scathing denunciation that it had been a crime to hold these people on trial all that time without a single piece of evidence in accordance with the charge being introduced by the prosecution against any defendant. The communist press had been gloating that the sedition trial was part of the Moscow Purge trials then in session all over Europe. I reproduced the item on one of my bulletins sent to every congressman. Background of Elizabeth Dilling. Travel in more than 60 countries convinced me that the USA had the greatest system of government and was the most fortunate nation on earth. I did not want it Sovietized, collectivized. Careful research and documentation have resulted in the fact that nothing I have ever printed has, to date, been refuted by friend or foe. Born in Chicago, daughter of Dr. L. Kirkpatrick, physician and surgeon, of Virginian, Scotch-Irish, Presbyterian ancestry. My mother, Elizabeth Harding, descended from a long line of Anglican bishops through her father. Her mother, Jane Muscat, was of English-French descent with a Catholic priest uncle in Paris. I married Albert Dilling, of Norwegian Lutheran ancestry. Mother of 2 children, married and active in Episcopal Church, of which I am a communicant. Graduate of the Starrett School for Girls, Chicago Normal School, University of Chicago student before and after marriage. Pupil of world's greatest harpist, Alberto Salvi, was concert harpist and president of Chicago Harpist Society. The Russian trip ended a musical career and a, quote, nice, end quote, suburbanite existence. Writings. The famous Red Network, a who's who and handbook of radicalism for patriots, of which some 100,000 copies have circled the globe, unrefuted factually by friend or foe. The Roosevelt Red Record and its background, a second Red Network of over 400 pages with 2 indexes. The Octopus on the Ramifications of Jewish Power. The Plot Against Christianity, republished as The Jewish Religion, Its Influence Today, directly addressing the teachings of Judaism and its influence in the affairs of the modern world. Next, Chapter 1, The Pharisees, the Talmud, and Modern Judaism.